Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Untold Tales from This Side of Nowhere. I'm your host, Connor Jones, and this week I am joined by a special guest. And it has been quite a while since I've had a guest on the podcast, so I'm pretty pumped. He's pretty pumped, and everybody's just pumped on this episode.
Yeah, we're only recording at 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning, so of course we're pumped.
And our hair looks great, so
Yeah. Well, I was just realizing, looking at, you know, our video feed here that I could be your, you know, um, special agent version. I just have my disguise on, the beard, but looking at our face, we still look a lot alike, Connor.
yeah, we do.
So, pretty funny. I never really have thought we looked that much alike, but on video, yeah, pretty close.
Yeah, yeah, and in pictures and stuff. You can tell we're twins, so.
Yeah.
Well, before we dive in with today's story, let me tell you about our sponsor. Oh, and I'll introduce our guest in just a moment. This week, our sponsor is Basin Pharmacy in Basin, Wyoming. Basin Pharmacy is your hometown pharmacy, as well as your source for over the counter medicine, vitamins, and supplements. They also carry office supplies, Russell Stover chocolates, and greeting cards. The friendly folks at Basin Pharmacy are happy to help with any of your medicinal needs, whether you have a prescription to fill or a question about your meds. You can stop in Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. and Saturdays from 9 a.m. to noon. We're also sponsored by the Wyoming Welcome Program. The folks at the Wyoming Welcome Program have two programs, the Table Talk brochures and their Wyoming Welcome baskets. Table Talk brochures are placed on restaurant tables in Cody and Powell and carry advertisements from local businesses. Wyoming Welcome baskets are distributed to new move-ins to the Park County area and include promotional items from other businesses. So if you're interested in participating in either of these advertising opportunities, please contact them at Haley J. That's HALEYJ at WyomingWelcome.com. And now, the podcast. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, today I am joined by my twin brother Adam, who's recording with me through the magic of technology from Layton, Utah.
Yeah, it's great to be on the podcast this week. So, it's pretty cool we can do this.
Yeah. The last time we recorded together, the episode was "You Have a Twin." So that was episode. What number was that? Let me look here. It's been a second.
Yeah, that was a little ways back, but it's always fun to be on the show. Oh, I
Yeah.
know we've got an avid listener base.
Yes. Very dedicated. The denizens of poverty flats. Yeah, it was like last summer, I think, when we recorded together. So, but today we are recording a story about a pet. Probably not a pet like many of you have had. I don't know. Maybe someone out there has had one of these as a pet, but this is a good old fashioned Northern Wyoming wildlife story.
And speaking of pets, I do believe our first pet ever was a salamander that Brenna caught.
Oh, yes.
So this is right in line with the family tradition. So
Yep. That was at the trailer house, I believe.
yes, I think she tried keeping it in a play kitchen, and it sadly did not did not like to play kitchen.
I don't know if it stayed there or not, but there have been a lot of pets in the Jones family history. So this is just we can file this under the pets we have known file. So
Yeah.
Anyways, today's story is titled Levi the Leviathan. So, um, feel free to jump in whenever you want, Adam. And if you want to play all characters, not uh Al, then I think that might work.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. When we met Levi, he was diminutive in size and pretty jumpy. The jumpy part may have been due to the fact that we had just splashed him up onto the bank of Uncle Greg's irrigation reservoir with a railroad tie. You'd probably be pretty jumpy too if you had just been chucked Indiana Jones style out of a reservoir by an enormous piece of wood. Levi and all the other crawdads we had captured wriggled in the mud or flitted back and forth in the shallows like bottle rockets while we heaved on the huge wooden beam. I think it was Fred who discovered we could catch crawdads by rolling the railroad tie, dark and waterlogged, from the shallows and up onto the shore. I would call it a beach, but the tiny spit of sand on the edge of the reservoir hardly qualified. While it was far too small for sunbathing, the beach did give us enough room to corner the crawdads. The three of us would drag the railroad tie out into the shallows to a point where it just floated, then we would roll it up onto the mud. Rolling the tie was fairly easy for the three of us, Fred, Cousin Jim, and I. The muddy water sloshed around our knees, and crawdads would zing around our legs, bouncing off our feet like little torpedoes. Getting hit by crawdads didn't hurt by any means, but it could be a little unnerving watching them bounce off your skin. The irrigation water was loaded with the tiny crustaceans. They came in with the river water diverted to irrigate the Bighorn Basin's crops, and proliferated in the reservoirs and ponds of Poverty Flats. Now we were going to make it big selling them as pets. Or at least, that was the plan.
Look at that.
Fred hollered.
There's a whole bunch of them. Quick, catch them.
Fred urged. The three of us fell onto our hands and knees, scooping up handfuls of thick black mud. And more often than not, we were rewarded with a tiny, squirming crawfish or two.
I got one.
Jim yelled excitedly.
Quick, find something to put it in.
I haven't drank all my soda yet, I said, but we could put them in here. I unscrewed the bottle's cap and pinched the crawdad struggling on Jim's mud-caked palm between two fingers. Whoa! I yelled, and dropped the tiny critter into the soda bottle with a plop. I shook my hand as if I'd just touched a hot stove and wiped it across my scrawny 12-year-old chest. That's so weird! All those little legs give me the heebie-jeebies, I shouted, looking down at my hand to be sure my fingers were still intact.
Oh, don't be such a baby.
Jim grumbled, giving me a shove.
Here, I've got one.
Fred hollered, running over to us, his feet splashing through the murky water.
Oh, you're right.
He shivered, squeezing his crawdad between his pointer finger and thumb.
That does feel weird.
With a little splash, his crawdad landed in the 7-Up at the bottom of the bottle. As soon as the two crustaceans hit the soda, they whipped the pop into a frenzy, zipping back and forth and pinging off the plastic walls of the bottle.
I don't know if they like the carbonation too much,
Jim observed, watching one crawdad attempting frantically to climb the wall of the pop bottle.
Quick, add some more water.
Indeed, it didn't appear the crawfish cared too much for soda pop, as evidenced by their frantic convulsions in the bubbly beverage. Quickly, we splashed deeper into the reservoir, and I stooped to submerge the bottle, being careful to hold it upright in a vertical position so the water could spill over the rim of the little bottle opening without allowing the crawdads to escape. Straightening back up, I checked on the crawdads again, Jim and Fred close by. The resulting combination of soda pop and ditch water was a brackish liquid that was still clear enough for the crawdads to be visible, and seemed to be more to the little guy's liking. Only the occasional bubble of carbonation rose from the diluted soda, and the crawdad settled to the bottom of the bottle.
Let's catch some more.
Jim urged. Yeah, I bet we could sell them as pets if we catch enough, I agreed.
I bet we could sell them for $1 apiece.
Fred said happily. There's probably 1 million of them in this reservoir, I calculated. Dollar signs flashed in my eyes as I considered the potential. I was amazed Uncle Greg had never capitalized on this aspect of the ranch. Here he was sitting on a veritable gold mine of marine life, and he was wasting time feeding sheep and cows.
Oh man, how many business ventures did we take up that were harebrained?
Yeah, there was the junkyard irrigation project. There was I remember spraying weeds and you got paid by the gallon and we were hiking like a half mile before we sprayed anything.
Yeah, we only had one four-wheeler sprayer, and then you had a backpack sprayer.
Yeah.
I was also thinking about uh, when we would pick rocks for concrete pours.
Oh yeah, a penny a rock.
Yep, we made a lot of money.
Did you know they're discontinuing pennies now?
What? When did
Yeah,
that
the
come
mint
out?
just got its last order of blanks.
Are you serious? How did I miss that?
Yeah, mom was telling me. They're just
Uh,
not worth a penny's not worth anything. It costs 3.7 cents to produce one.
yeah, that's sad.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, I guess we really couldn't make much money picking rocks.
Yeah. Well, and even $1 a crawdad wouldn't be much anymore.
I know. Ugh, crazy inflation.
Yeah. But there were tons in that reservoir.
Yeah, I was amazed at how many there were.
Yeah. Not very big, but
Yeah.
let's see. By the time we left for home, our 7 Up bottle was teeming with crawfish. Though we did not realize it, one of them would come to be known as Levi the Leviathan, and his meteoric rise to fame and eventual fall from grace would result in a tragedy of dramatic proportions, or at least dramatic for a crawfish. Since Fred and I already had a fish tank at our house, it was decided that we would raise the crawdads until they were of size sufficient enough to merit their sale on the open market. With a stroke of genius that foreshadowed my later successes in life, I determined it would be best not to pour the soda pop and reservoir water into the fish tank, and so we decided to strain the crawdads out of our soda and ditch water solution. The tool for the job was one of my mother's dish towels, which Fred stretched over the top of a mason jar while I poured. The dish towel worked perfectly, and I made a mental note to patent the process in the near future. Be that as it may, the effectiveness of the dish towel did little to placate our mother when she discovered Fred and I shaking crawdads out of it and into the fish tank in the living room. It took some smooth talking on Fred's part to avoid some serious punishment for the loss of Mom's dish towel.
But Mom, it was just a plain white dish towel before. Now it's got all these brown splotches like camouflage.
If it had been possible to remove the crawdads from the fish tank, I'm sure Mom would have made us toss them out after we finished folding a week's worth of laundry as punishment for what we had done to her dish towel. But the crawdads zipped around the tank so fast and dug themselves down into the gravel at the bottom of the tank so effectively, catching them was like trying to lasso grasshoppers. As luck would have it, the only thing that could catch the crawdads seemed to be the fish in the tank, and they seemed to enjoy crawfish immensely, much to our dismay. Before the week was out, all that remained of the 20 odd crayfish we had placed in the tank were a collection of itty bitty crawdad claws that swirled around the bottom of the tank as the filter cycled the water. There was one crawdad, however, that the fish couldn't seem to get, and that was Levi. I
You
feel
know,
like there could
Levi,
be a musical flourish right there.
yeah. Well, I was thinking that, maybe he was more of a gladiator than a Leviathan.
Yeah.
So,
Somehow he repelled all the fish.
yes, that may be foreshadowing, though.
Yeah. The main reason for Levi's preservation was probably the fact he was slightly bigger than his counterparts. Most of the crawdads we caught were about half an inch in length or less, but Levi was nearly a full inch long and looked for all the world like a little lobster.
It looks like only one of your crawdads survived.
Dad observed a few days after we had introduced our catch to the fish tank. Yeah, I said glumly. Our dreams of cornering the market on crawdads in northwestern Wyoming were in shambles at this point, but Dad didn't seem to appreciate our loss. Perhaps he just had a better idea of the going price for half-inch crawdads and realized our financial losses weren't as big as we had thought.
That one down there under the plastic rock is pretty big.
Dad continued, pointing to the one surviving crawdad.
Yeah,
Fred agreed,
he's a Leviathan.
and the name stuck. The tenacious little guy came to be known as Leviathan, or Levi for short. At first, the name was more tongue in cheek than anything, but as time went on, Levi actually began to grow into his name. I can only assume he ate the fish food that filtered down to the bottom of the tank, where he sat nestled under the plastic rock. He would spend hours under the little fish tank decoration, his pincers opening and closing. Fred and I delighted in sitting and staring at him for entire minutes at a time.
That's about our attention span then.
Exactly. A few weeks went by and Levi grew and grew. By now he was bigger than all of the fish and he had ventured out into the open, his multitude of legs milling along as he trundled through the tank. Gone were the days of cowering under the rock. Now a full 5 inches in length, Levi was the biggest crawdad any of us had ever seen. His moltings had to be fished out of the tank with our little green fish net, and Fred and I discovered they produced a very satisfying response when presented to our sisters, especially at unexpected times and locations. It was after one of these experiments that Mom predicted it might be necessary for the tank and Levi to part ways, and we quickly stopped terrorizing the girls, even though they probably deserved it.
Yes.
Fred and I were delighted with our little pet. We thought he was the best critter we had ever captured, and as you mentioned, there were several.
Yeah.
This was before the horny toad, though.
Yeah. Oh, the horny toad. That's another story.
Yes, put a pin in that. In spite of the loss of all his buddies, we were pleased with the results of our crawfish fishing. We probably would have kept Levi for a long time if he hadn't gotten into a heap of trouble one morning.
Dun dun dun.
Yeah. Candace was up early, getting ready to go to her seminary class at church before school when it happened. She had just sat down to eat a piece of toast when she heard a strange sound. It was like something being dragged across a smooth surface, accompanied by a faint clicking.
I wish we could have a soundbite here.
Yeah, if maybe I can find one online, we'll see.
Yeah.
Intrigued and a little scared, she followed the strange sound from the dining room and into the adjoining office. The sound got louder. In one corner of the office sat a bench with a floral cushion, and the sound seemed to be coming from underneath the piece of furniture. Candace stooped down to see what was making the noise, and we were quite abruptly alerted to her discovery by her ear-splitting screams. And I don't know who was more surprised, her or, well, we'll see what she was surprised by. In a matter of minutes, everyone in the house was awake, wondering what could possibly make Candace scream like that.
Candace, what's wrong?
Dad asked, concern evident in his voice.
It's that thing!
Oh, that was a great Candace voice. Candace yelled, pointing back into the office she had fled.
What? What thing? The crawdad!
Fred and I, still clad in pajamas, hurried into the office and crouched down to look under the bench Candace had indicated. Sure enough, there in the dark corner sat Levi. Isn't there? I think Charles Dickens has a line about like a crawdad in a dark dungeon or something.
Yes, I think so. I think it's
There's
in A Christmas Carol.
yeah, in A Christmas Carol. Let me see here, because I was just the image made me think of his line, Christmas Carol lobster. Let me see. Like a bad lobster in a dark cellar. That's what it was.
There you go.
That was Levi. Just a small lobster. Levi was in a sorry state, having picked up a good deal of lint as he made his way from the living room to the office. Apparently, he had found a way to escape from the fish tank, drop down to the carpet, and cross 2 rooms in the house before hiding under the bench.
I think it's important to note here that he was dressed in full black and had a length of rope around his shoulder.
Yes, and a nunchuck in one claw,
Yeah. Levi, how did you get here?
Fred yelled. He must have escaped from the tank, I said.
Well, if he can get out of the tank, it's time for him to find a new home.
Mom declared. But Mom, I began, but she quickly cut me off.
No!
She
I've let you
growled.
have your fun, but now it's time for the crawdad to go.
Fred and I were devastated. We didn't want to release him back into the ditch where we would never see him again, but Mom was insistent.
I want him out, and not just out of the tank, by the end of the day.
Mom demanded. At least let me put him back in the tank while we get dressed, I pleaded.
Yes, let's put him back in there for now.
Dad said.
Poor guy's probably all dried out.
Mom rolled her eyes and heaved a sigh, but allowed us to scoop Levi up. When he dropped back into the tank, he immediately drifted to the bottom and seemed to heave a sigh himself. As Fred and I got dressed, my mind began racing. What could we do with Levi so we didn't have to say goodbye to him forever? I wondered. Then, a brilliant idea flashed across my mind like a lightning strike in a summer thunderstorm, which happened all the time, I'm sure. Fred, I've got it, I blurted out.
What?
Fred asked, his expression going from downcast to hopeful in an instant. We can take Levi to school. Miss Hallstrom has that fish tank with the frogs in her classroom. I bet she'd let us put Levi in there.
That's a great idea.
Fred agreed. So it was that we showed up an hour or so later in Miss Hallstrom's biology lab with a rather large crawdad in a mason jar.
Miss Hallstrom, we have something to ask you.
Fred began when we burst into her classroom. Miss Hallstrom, who had been sitting at her desk, looked up with an inquisitive look on her face. I, too, would be wary of a couple of boys asking for favors before the school day even began.
Good morning, boys. What can I do for you?
Miss Hallstrom replied, standing up from her chair. Well, we have this crawdad we caught in the reservoir, I said, holding up the mason jar. That's a great lead, every time.
Yeah.
Levi snapped a pincer shut, as if in greeting.
We call him Levi the Leviathan.
Fred added.
He's been growing like crazy for a few weeks.
But then he escaped from the fish tank and crawled around the house, I added.
And he really scared Candace, so Mom wants us to get rid of him.
Fred chipped in. Can we put him in the fish tank with your devil frogs? I asked. Miss Hallstrom raised her eyebrows. Even after teaching for several years, it's possible it got it's possible to get overwhelmed with a torrent of twin talk.
Now we're not stopping here to expound on the term devil frogs. Does
Yeah, I
that
was
come
just
later?
gonna say, I don't know why I said devil frogs and then just moved on without any explanation.
Well, as far as I know, that is what everybody except what Miss Hallstrom called them.
Yes. And they really were devil frogs.
Yeah, I hated those frogs.
They are albino frogs with beady red eyes. And you know how the web feed and like it's rubbery? Somehow it's worse when they're white.
Yeah, definitely. I almost remember them being somewhat translucent too.
Yeah, especially like the webbing on the fingers and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, those things were oh, yeah,
I'm
devilish.
assuming she bought them from the pet store in Billings and kept them in that fish tank in the back of the biology room.
I think so, and there were 2 of them?
Yeah, two devil frogs.
Oh, man. Okay. Well, let me look at this crawdad.
Miss Hallstrom said slowly. She peered through the glass at our pet crayfish and sized him up. It didn't take long,
I don't know, boys.
Miss Hallstrom said after a moment.
Oh, please, Miss Hallstrom.
Fred begged.
If you don't take him, Mom says we'll have to throw him in the ditch and we'll never see him again. We'll clean out your fish tank every week if you want.
A smile spread across Miss Hallstrom's face, and she shook her head.
Oh, all right.
She finally relented.
You can put him in with the frogs. I bet he'll eat whatever they eat.
Thank you so much, I gushed, and Fred and I made our way to the back of the room where the devil frogs sat waiting. Devil frogs was the moniker students had bestowed upon the pair of albino frogs Miss Hallstrom kept in a large fish tank in her classroom. They had beady red eyes, and their pale bodies stood out in stark contrast to the colorful gravel at the bottom of the tank.
You don't think he'll hurt them, do you?
Fred asked, glancing from Levi and back to the frogs.
I might add that I said that probably rather hopefully.
Yeah, that's true. I think everybody kind of wanted to watch the Devil Frogs and Levi the Leviathan battle it out.
I really think that's what my first thought was.
Yeah,
But, oh, I don't think so.
Miss Hallstrom said.
Your crawdad isn't any bigger than they are, so I doubt he would.
And here's the thing, Levi was like the size of these frogs.
Yeah, I almost remember him being a little bit bigger than them, but
Yeah, and being a little concerned that the lobster might hurt one of her frogs and she would get upset with us. So,
yeah, well, if I was a betting man, I would have put my money on Levi.
yeah, armor, pincers. I mean, yeah,
He looked like he came right out of the movie Atlantis.
exactly. Okay, Levi, I said, unscrewing the lid on the jar. Here's your new home. Go meet your roommates. With a splash, I dumped Levi into the tank. The frogs started immediately, surprised by the new addition. Levi quickly flitted to the bottom of the tank and found a place under a rock to make himself comfortable, as was his habit. Then he sat in a defensive position, his claws out and his eyes surveying his new surroundings. Don't they have eyes on the end of stalks? I'm trying to remember crawdad eyes.
I
No,
think
they're in
they're
the head.
yeah.
Okay.
And honestly, crawdads, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of how they look.
Yeah, no. And honestly, I think I'd still kind of get the heebie jeebies picking one up. You have to pinch them in the middle of the body so none of the legs or the pinchers touch you. So,
Yeah, it's not my favorite thing.
yeah. The frogs regarded Levi warily, and they slowly settled back to their place at the bottom of the tank.
You guys are going to get along just fine.
Fred said.
More foreshadowing.
Yeah. Just then the bell rang, and Fred and I headed for the door. Thank you so
Thank you
much,
so
Miss
much, Miss
Hallstrom.
Hallstrom.
we called back to her as we exited the classroom, confident we would be back to visit Levi soon. Little did we know, tragedy lurked nearby.
Da-da-dum.
The next morning, when we arrived, well, I should mention, we did see Levi later that day in biology class, and all the kids were super excited.
Yeah, we felt pretty cool.
Yeah, and
And
Jim was proud of him too, because Jim helped catch him, and
and maybe it's, kind of sparked our thoughts of glory and riches and fame, seeing how much people liked him.
yeah. But that was day one. So we saw him in biology class, and the next morning when we arrived at school, we hurried to Miss Hallstrom's room to check on Levi, having bid him farewell before leaving the afternoon before. When we reached her door, Miss Hallstrom was already waiting for us.
Hey guys,
She said when we entered the room. She was fidgeting nervously with the hem of her purple blouse, and she had an uneasy look on her face.
I'm afraid I have some bad news. Levi!
Fred blurted out, and we rushed to the back of the science lab. There we stopped dead in front of the tank and stared at the devil frogs. The two albino frogs sat contentedly on the bottom of the tank and stared back at us with their unblinking red eyes. "Where is he at?" I asked. "Did he hurt the frogs? Did you have to take him out?" I asked, turning to Miss Hallstrom, who had joined us at the tank.
No,
Miss Hallstrom said slowly.
he didn't hurt the frogs.
"Then where is he?" I blurted out. Fred and I searched the tank desperately, our eyes flitting back and forth as we scanned the tank's interior.
Oh no.
Fred gasped suddenly. "What?" I asked.
Look there, under the rock.
He said, pointing. I peered to where he indicated, and then I saw them. There, under the rock where Levi had been hiding, was a pair of little greenish-blue claws, all that was left of our pet crawdad.
I, uh, I don't want to, ruin the story, but I do believe that this actually took place over a few days, and Levi actually the first thing he lost was one of those claws.
Oh, really? I didn't remember him getting eaten a piece at a time.
Yeah, so he lost. I think he held him off for a couple of days, but he lost one claw and that was it. Then he couldn't fight them both at the same time, and
Oh, poor
that was the end.
yeah. In the end, yep, the frogs got it.
Yeah, I uh, we could add that as the frogs stared at us, one of them let out a croak, which may have been a burp.
Yeah, a frog belch. Yeah.
Yeah.
For a moment, we all sat in silence, staring at the fallen Leviathan's remains. Well, he definitely didn't hurt the frogs, I finally grunted.
Besides maybe a case of indigestion.
Yeah, right? A faint smile flickered across Miss Hallstrom's face.
No,
She said, shaking her head.
he certainly didn't. I'm sorry, boys. I guess frogs like to eat crawdads.
And I looked this up. Yeah, crawdads are a part of frogs' diets. So, but
Well,
crawdads,
Levi could have told you that.
yeah, right? Crawdads do eat frogs too, though. So, it could
It's a
have gone both
frog
ways.
eat crawdad world out there.
Yeah, it's a froggy crawdad world.
If he would had have been bigger, it may have been a different story.
Yeah, I mean, and probably if it wasn't 2-on-1, maybe Levi could have taken one frog.
Yeah, maybe we should have set up a ring and only let one of them tap in at a time.
Exactly. The bell rang, and we trudged off to our first hour class. Thanks, Miss Hallstrom, we said as we left.
Dang,
Fred said.
I guess we should have let him go in the ditch. I should have known he'd get eaten by those devil frogs.
Yeah, I sighed, then turned to Fred. Hey, let's go back during lunch and see if Miss Hallstrom will let us fish out his claws. We could dry them out and save them to remember him by,
That's a good idea.
Fred said.
Maybe Candace will want one.
I grinned. I doubt it. There you go. Another untold tale from this side of nowhere.
Nice.
You did a really good job. That was very entertaining.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, you should come back more often.
I would like to. Um, I've already shared a few of my ideas with you of different ideas for the show. Um, but it's always fun to reminisce. We have always told stories.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
it goes without saying that there isn't tons to do in Poverty Flats, so storytelling is part of life.
it really is. I being here in Layton, Utah. It seems like when you're bored, you end up jumping in the car and driving somewhere to go wander around a store or buy some fast food that you don't need. But growing up, it was if you were bored, you could watch TV or read a book, or you could go outside and enjoy the freedom that only country kids know.
And so much wildlife. I'm actually here at Mom and Dad's this weekend for Memorial Day, and at 4:45 I was woken up by birds singing like it was their last day on Earth. So
Yeah. Well, and I remember during a couple of our camping trips out in the backyard, there was one time I think we heard a bobcat or a mountain lion screaming. It was probably a bobcat, and that was pretty terrifying.
yeah.
And then I also remember in the trees behind the house, you could sometimes hear the coyotes partying.
Oh yeah. Oh, I need to do a story about camping out on the lawn when Camden was like 6 or something and the mosquitoes got him.
Oh man, we could do a whole episode just on mosquitoes.
Oh my gosh. We got mosquitoes, wind. We need to do one on the horny toad.
You might even need to do one on snowdrifts. Our Wyoming constituents will definitely know what those are, but I've realized other places they don't really deal with drifting snow.
Yeah, there's too many things built around the roads. So,
Yeah. Well, and here along the Wasatch Front, everyone is protected by those mountains we're right against. And so it does not get very windy typically
yeah.
down here in the Utah Valley. So most people don't appreciate what a good friend the wind is.
Yeah.
It's more like a intermittent visitor down here than a constant companion.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Well, thank you for being on today, and I hope that we have another opportunity to do this again in the future. So,
I do as well. I'm always a willing guest and hopefully a welcome one.
oh, very welcome. So, as always, you can find us on wherever you get your podcast, and be sure to like and subscribe. And
Yes.
this has been another untold tale from this side of nowhere, where we work twice as hard for half as much and still find time for the important things,
Like
like
fishing.
fishing. See you next time, folks.